You've probably heard by now, Israel's military resumed military action against the Hamas terrorist group. Israel launched a large-scale bombing campaign all across Gaza Strip. And according to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, the renewed strikes on Hamas is just the beginning. The Prime Minister said that Israel will act against Hamas with increasing intensity. And he said military pressure is necessary for the release of hostages who are still being held by Hamas. And now, we've got the ceasefire that lasted a couple of months. It's all over now. So how might the coming weeks unfold? Well, joining me now from Jerusalem to discuss all of this is Chris Mitchell. He's a Middle East Bureau Chief for CBN News. Chris, thanks so much for joining us. Always an honor to have you on Washington Watch.
Great to be with you, Jody.
All right, listen, for those who may not have been tracking very closely what's been going on over the last couple of months during the ceasefire, fill us in. What was supposed to happen versus what actually has happened?
Well, there was an attempt by mediators, including Steve Witkoff, to try to extend what's called phase one. That's where 33 hostages, both living and dead, were actually released by Hamas. So that's what Israel wanted. That's what the United States wanted. But Hamas wanted an end to phase one, the beginning of what they call phase two. And phase two would have led to the end of the war, the withdrawal of all IDF troops, and Hamas would have remained in power. That was something that the United States was unwilling, Israel was unwilling to do. Hamas just about a week ago offered one Israeli-American, Edan Alexander, and about 5 dead hostages. That was unacceptable, and it was also called psychological manipulation by Israel. So what happened yesterday was a massive bombing campaign that went back into Gaza. And now we understand today that there are boots on the ground inside Gaza. They've taken over control of some of what's called the Netzarim corridor that divides Gaza north and south, and they'll be advancing. And as you said, Prime Minister Netanyahu warned and said right now the new policy of Israel is that they will negotiate under fire. In other words, the fighting will not stop, even if Hamas comes back to the negotiating table. Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz said Hamas is facing annihilation if they continue to do this. Right now, we understand one of the proposals that Israel wants Hamas to accept would be a 50-day ceasefire with half of the hostages released at the beginning and half at the end.
Wow. So that really puts the pressure on Hamas. There's no question. You mentioned phase one actually came to an end, but as I understand, the negotiations for the next phase really have not made any progress. So what you're referring to is the next 50 days or so. Is that actually getting any traction?
Not as far as we understand right now, Jody, that they're really not negotiating right now. Right now, the biggest action is going on the ground inside Gaza. People in Gaza are actually being given maps and leaflets to tell them to get out of harm's way. We talked yesterday to the IDF international spokesman, Nadav Shoshani, and he was telling us that they've given out these maps as a way to make sure that these Gazans can get out of the combat zones and to spare civilian lives. It's exactly what Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu said as well. So I think the action right now is not at the negotiating table, but on the ground right now in Gaza, where the IDF is promising to intensify, as you said, its actions on the ground to try to bring Hamas to the negotiating table and bring an end to this stalemate between Hamas and Israel.
Well, I know the Prime Minister and IDF as a whole, I mean, just brilliant war strategists. I know Hamas had been seeking a Ramadan ceasefire that would last throughout March. And, of course, Israel gave them the first couple of weeks of a ceasefire, but then all of a sudden they resumed with great power. So we've been hearing about a new proposal from the U.S. that from what I understand, has been accepted by Israel, but not by Hamas. Can you tell us anything about that?
Yeah, exactly. I think that that's the proposal, I believe, from Steve Witkoff, the 50 days where half of the hostages would be released at the beginning, the half at the end. It has been accepted by Israel, and but rejected right now by Hamas. And I would say, I think there's been more coordination, and I think perhaps Israel and the White House are on the same page right now, believing, Jody, that it's the military pressure that's going to make an impact on Hamas. And I would say there's a very strong two sides here in Israel about the resumption of military action. On the one hand, you have many of the hostage families that are saying this is going to endanger our families, our hostages inside Gaza. Other people are saying, and including in the new policy of the prime minister and the government, is that it's the military pressure that allows the hostages to be able to get. Right now, they've released about 196 out of the 251 that were taken on October 7th. What you see also, Jody, in the news, you see a lot of people demonstrating against the government, against the policy, but there is a strong other force, and one of them in what's called the Tikva Forum, and they say it's important to look at the whole picture, not just the hostages, but you have to see the security of the whole state of Israel. What they mean by that is that in the phase one, almost 2,000 prisoners have been released through these deals. Those prisoners have been terrorists, many of them with blood on their hands. They historically have always gone back to terror. And so the question for them is, what about the people who may be killed, wounded, injured in a future terror attack? So those are the people that say, let's take a look at the whole state of Israel and what we need to do to get our hostages out.
Wow. Well, getting those hostages out, as you referenced, it really is. It's two sides of the same coin. I mean, on the one hand, a tremendous military pressure that's being placed on Hamas. But the other side of the coin is indeed the risk that poses to the hostages. It really is a fine line that they're trying to walk here, isn't it?
It is, and it's been a fine line ever since October 7th, Jody, and it's been gut-wrenching for Israelis. The Israeli people are more like a family than anything, and they see each of these hostages as part of their extended family. They pray for them, they hope for them, they do what they can to advocate for their release. But how that happens is really the difference between many Israelis here. You see that out on the street. In fact, there was a large demonstration today in Jerusalem, demonstrating about this ceasefire deal that now has become a military operation.
Well, even the local press there has added another layer of this, that the Israeli military sources have talked about seeing an increase of Hamas activity, evidently in an effort to regroup their forces here in recent days while there's been a couple of weeks of ceasefire here in March. Isn't that yet another reason for go ahead and deal with it now and to resume the strong military action to prevent a regrouping of Hamas?
That's exactly right, Jody. In fact, that's one of the reasons why they did go in, because they knew that there was going to be another attempt by Hamas, believe it or not, to go into some of the southern communities inside Gaza. So they knew that was happening. They preemptively struck so that it didn't happen. And they also, in addition to that, they eliminated some of the top leadership of Hamas inside Gaza. The so-called prime minister, he's been in power since, I think, last July. The justice minister, one of Hamas's spokesmen, was eliminated. So both the factors of eliminating some of Hamas's leadership and preventing this terror attack that was being planned were two of the factors for this military, at least the bombardment last night.
Yeah, and I know you don't know all the details, and I don't presume that you do, but is that what Israel is targeting here, primarily the leadership of Hamas? Do you have any idea kind of what specific targets they may have right now?
Well, I would say obviously the leadership, and they seem to have incredible intelligence and knowing who they're targeting, and after they've been able to target and who they're being able to find, plus any potential terror attacks that are being planned. We understand, we've heard that, Hamas continues to build tunnels, believe it or not. They continue to rearm, they continue to regroup and recruit other fighters. And so it may be another long slog for the IDF and the military to be able to eventually eliminate Hamas completely. It's almost been a year and a half now since October 7th. And also looming in the background, Jody, is this potential of Trump's plan to try to, relocate the Gazan people to another country and then rebuild Gaza.
Wow. Yeah, that's true. That's a whole nother aspect of all of this. And another part of it all, too, is the propaganda campaign. I mean, Hamas, they're all saying that Israel is killing tons and tons of civilians in all of this. But obviously, we can't trust what Hamas says. But, in fact, they intentionally, as we all know, they use civilians as human shields. And yet many people continue to parrot this propaganda. What kind of impact is that having?
Well, in the world press and many news agencies that sort of parrot that, and there are many that have done that since October 7th, I think they're giving a sort of a false image of what actually happens. As I mentioned, the IDF has been giving out leaflets and maps and telling people to get out of combat zones, get out of harm's way. Hamas, on the other hand, has been using their own people as human shields and using the deaths of many of these Palestinians as propaganda and then demonizing Israel. So it really is, that's part of the battlefield here. And it's part of Hamas's playbook, as it were, for many, many years. They just put their civilians in harm's way and use their deaths as propaganda. On the other hand, the IDF has been for years sending leaflets, text messages, phone calls to individuals inside a combat zone to get them out of harm's way. But tragically, many times they don't, or may be even prevented by Hamas to get out of harm's way. That's why many people are praying not only for the peace of Jerusalem and for the protection of IDF soldiers, but all those people that are caught in harm's way.
Yeah, it's just amazing to me how many within various media outlets and international leaders in various part of the world buy this propaganda. When they're sending leaflets and text messages, everything they can to protect civilians, it really is amazing. And yet Israel is unfazed by all that propaganda. I mean, even the defense minister is coming out in recent days just saying that they are just going to unleash unbelievable fury in Gaza like they've never seen before if they don't release the hostages. So it's not just that the war is continuing, but Israel's actually turning the heat up. Wouldn't you say that's accurate?
Very much so. I mean, if you take a look at the statements of Prime Minister Netanyahu and Defense Minister Israel Katz, that's exactly what they're doing. And now they're saying they're going to be negotiating under fire, meaning that this campaign is going to intensify and it's going to continue until there can be some release of more hostages. So that's exactly what Israel's doing, and I think it's something probably in coordination, perhaps, with the White House. At least that seems to be on the same page. Because if you look at the wider context, Jody, it's exactly what the U.S. is doing with the Houthis down in Yemen. They're unleashing a massive bombing campaign against them to stop the Houthis from interrupting global shipping. That has cost maybe estimated $250 billion and just interrupted, the global economy because of that. So that's what the U.S. is doing in Yemen. Israel is promising to do that against the Houthis. And by the way, yesterday, the Houthis fired another ballistic missile against Israel. It was shot down, but they continue to try to disrupt either global shipping or come against the state of Israel.
Chris Mitchell, 30 seconds or so left. How in the world would you encourage our viewers and listeners to be praying right now for Israel?
Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. Pray for wisdom for Prime Minister Netanyahu and his government. Pray for wisdom for President Trump and his national security team, because they're working together. And pray that that they would lead them to eliminate what the enemies of Israel, whether it's in Gaza, whether it's down in Yemen, or whether it's in the Islamic Republic of Iran and its nuclear program.
Thank you so much, Chris Mitchell, Middle East Bureau Chief for CBN News. Always an honor to have you. God bless you. Be safe. And we are praying.